So right now we're talking to Batwoman, Emma Teeling, an Irish longevity researcher who is trying to figure out the secret of youth by studying bats, actually. Yes. Emma, I'm asking you a question, I'm asking basically everybody, which is how did you get into longevity?
I think that's a great introduction. It's great fun to be called Batwoman. So how I got into longevity was I started studying bats for my PhD. And I was asking questions, is how did bats evolve? What mammals are they most closely related to? How did flight evolve in mammals? Because all bats fly. And could we use this new technology, which was the ability to sequence genes from multiple different types of animals that weren't just flies or mice or C. elegans? We could use this new technology to sequence bat genes, to align them all up, what parts of the genes were the same in different species, what parts were different, so we could make evolutionary trees. And as part of all of this, when I was sequencing the genes, working at the evolutionary history of bats, all of a sudden I realized, hold it a minute, these bats, they're really small, but yet they're living for decades, and they shouldn't be. They also have these other unique traits. They seem to be able to survive all of these viruses. How could there be so many viruses in bats without them getting sick? And so what actually happened was, by just looking at the natural world, by trying to uncover the evolution of mammals, to look as a pure zoologist, I realized that bats have these very unique traits that make them fantastic species to study the natural evolution of longer health span in mammals.
All right, so tell us, what is so special about the aging of bats?
So, in nature, typically there's a law. Small things live fast and die young. Big things live slow and live long. So think of a bowhead whale living at least over 211 years. We expect that to happen now, and they're in the cold waters. They're doing what we expected. Think of mice. Even in the lab, even with everything that we can do, you can't make a mouse live longer than 4 years. And as we saw in the talk today with Steve Ousted, wild mice won't live longer really ever than 1 year. But bats are the smallest mammals in the entire world. And doing these long-term marker capture studies with all these ecologists and field biologists, we realized that bats can live up to 42 years of age at least. So I'm going to tell you this cool story. So Myotis brantii, which is these Brandt's bats. So an individual, a male, was caught as an adult in Siberia. A ring was put on them. That's the only way you can age a bat. When you caught it, was it an adult, was it a baby, when you recatch it again. 42 years later, that same male was caught with no signs of aging. And what's unique is not the 42 years, because humans can do that. It's the fact that that species, that individual, that entire group weighs less than 1/3 of a lab mouse. So according to Steve Ousted in a seminal paper that kind of also made me get into aging research, when you look at how long mammals live for given their body size, if you're to correct for this, you find that there were 19 species of mammal that live longer than humans given their body size. One's a naked mole rat, but all other 18 are bats. And this is a complete underestimation how long they can live for. Because think about it, how are you going to work out how long a bat lives for? You got to catch it as a baby, and you got to recatch it and recatch it and recatch it and recatch it. It takes a long time to do those marker capture studies. And in some of the parts of the world, people have been doing these for 60 years. We've got some very, very good data. So bats have evolved ways to slow down aging. And if you want to correct for body size, the longest lived bat is living the equivalent of 200 and potentially 50 human years with no signs of aging, with no doctors, with no medicine in the wild. So they are super agers.
So how is it possible that bats can actually do this?
So I've spent the past 11 years studying this wild population of bats in Brittany and France. Of the longest lived type of bats is Myotis bats. And what we've been doing is we're taking a little bit of blood and a little bit of wing, non-lethally sampling the same individual year after year after year. We catch the whole colony every year and we tag all the babies. And what we've been able to do is we sequence all of the genes that are being expressed. And we ask the question, do bats regulate their genes in a different way that maybe could explain how long they live for? We've been also looking at some other biomarkers of aging, their telomeres. Do they shorten? Do they lengthen? What's going on? We look at their mitochondria. And what we've initially found, it's extraordinary. As bats age, their ability to repair their DNA increases not decreases like we do. Their ability to remove damage, cellular damage, the damage of living, increases, not decreases. In the longest lived type of bats, the myotis bats, their telomeres do not shorten with age. So they're doing unique things. They're repairing their DNA. They're removing damage. But the other interesting thing is they're able to maintain this very balanced immune response. So as we age, we become highly inflamed, everything goes out of control. A lot of the diseases of the old age are due to inflammation. But the bats seem to be able to match a high level of inflammation with an even higher level of anti-inflammation, keeping in perfect homeostasis. So these are some of our hypotheses.
Okay, so I mean, we can't really turn into bats as humans, and perhaps also don't want to. So in what way is this research relevant for humans? How could it translate?
Well, we share 20,000 genes with bats. We're all mammals. And what we've actually started to find now, as originally an evolution biologist and a phylogeneticist, when I originally thought that we were going to see major changes would be happening in the protein coding regions of genes in bats. That could make it all different. But the reality is, we're all pretty similar. What the difference is, though, is how they regulate it. Which gene do they switch on and off at what time? What happens in an infection with the bat? So the reality is that that's a good thing. Although it's a bit complicated, it means that we can now make switches to be able to be more like a bat. So the way that we would do this, we'd find ways to drug our immune system, for example. More anti-inflammation, more inflammation at the right time to be more like a bat. And there are drugs out there. We would find that actually we just need to boost our DNA repair mechanisms. Here's this part of this regulation that we can actually achieve with drugs. So initially I thought we were going to have to make transgenic humans, bat humans, Batman, Batwoman, Batgirl, Batbi. We don't need to. But we need to find drugs that mimic these fantastic adaptations that bats evolved. And I think that's how we do our translation.
Do you do anything personally to stay healthy and age as slowly as possible until you or others have, cracked anti-aging?
Well, I'm, as they say, don't do what I do what I say. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. That's one thing I do. I try to take exercise. I need to take more. Difficult as a mother, but they're all those excuses. I do definitely try to take lots of fresh vegetables, to try and eat better, to make sure I get macronutrients. There's lots of things I could do better. Not drink as much wine, eat chocolate, not eat so much chocolate, and probably sleep better. But these are things I work on. I do think that we should exercise and diet by far seems to be the easiest things that people can try and control themselves. But there's so many promising other things that are coming out of this conference that I might have to try some of them.
Where are we in this research on bats, and what are the next steps?
So right now, a lot of these insights come from studying one population of the longest lived bats, but we now have started to study the shorter lived bats. And our question is, what is the difference? What is really required for super aging? What have the shorter lived bats lost? So we're studying molosses in Panama. We're working with these captive colonies now where we're able to take different type of samples because these bats do get routinely culled. We're looking at let's identify all the different immune cells in bats and how do they change. And let's look right across the order. We're sequencing the genome of every single living bat species in collaboration with the Bat Biology Foundation and working with biotech to achieve all of this. So what's the future? The future is to do much more comparative studies. The future is to develop those functional assays. You can't keep the longest lived bats in the wild, but you can take a couple of cells and now grow induced pluripotent stem cells, make any type of bat cell you want and study that. We move forward. We need to eventually also functionally validate a lot of this stuff. So again, knock bat genes into C. elegans, into worms, into mice. See, does it make a difference? So I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a huge change in this field. We're going to take our understanding from bats, so bring it from biology to the bench. And I think the future is bright.
Great. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.